Broadcasting to you from somewhere deep in the heart of Texas. Once again, it's me, Honey Ann. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, Rich Magoo. Good to see you. All right. So today, there's no buts about it, okay? We'll just get right down to the nitty gritty. We're going to be talking about Job 30, verses 1 through 31, starting with 1. But now they mock me. Now they mock at me. Men younger than I, whose fathers I disdained to put with the dogs of my flock. Indeed, what profit is the strength of their hands to me? Their vigor has perished. They are gaunt from want and famine, fleeing late to the wilderness, desolate and waste, who pluck mallow by the bushes and broom tree roots for their food. They were driven out from among men. They shouted at them as at a thief. They had to live in the clefts of the valleys and caves of the earth and the rocks. Among the bushes they brayed, under the nettles they nestled. They were sons of fools, yes, sons of vile men. They were scorched from the land. And now I am their taunting song. Yes, I am their byword. They abhor me. They keep far from me. They do not hesitate to spit in my face, because he has loosed my bowstring and afflicted me. They have cast off restraint before me. At my right hand the rabble arises. They push away my feet, and they raise against me their ways of destruction. They break up my path. They promote my calamity. They have no helper. 14. They come as broad breakers under the ruinous storm. They roll along. Terrors are turned upon me. They pursue my honor as the wind, and my prosperity has passed like a cloud. And now my soul is poured out because of my plight. The days of affliction take hold of me. My bones are pierced in me at night, and my gnawing pains take no rest. By great force my garment is disfigured. It binds me about as the collar of my coat. He has cast me into the mire, and I have become like dust and ashes. I cry out to you, but you do not answer me. I stand up and you regard me. 21. But you have become cruel to me with the strength of your hand. You oppose me. You lift me up to the wind and cause me to ride on it. You spoil my success, for I know that you will bring me to death and to the house appointed for all living. Surely he would not stretch out his hand against the heap of ruins, if they cry out when he destroys it. Have I not wept for him who was in trouble? Has not my soul grieved for the poor? But when I looked for good, evil came to me, and when I waited for light, then came darkness. 27. My heart is in turmoil and cannot rest. Days of affliction confront me. I go about mourning, but not in the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry out for help. I am a brother of jackals and a companion of ostriches. My skin grows black and falls from me. My bones burn with fever. My harp is turned to mourning and my flute to the voice of those who weep. Boy. That's not some affliction right there. Lord have mercy. Okay, let's continue on. You are either moving towards the Son of God or away from him. There are no buts about it, guys. In this chapter of Job, we interestingly enough will focus on two words which say a lot about our current lives. Two words are but now. What comes to your mind right away on hearing these two words? If you have been a child of God for even a short amount of time, these two words make us think of a song. The song, Amazing Grace. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. It was grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, tools, and snares I have already come. 'Tis grace that brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead us home. The Lord has promised good to me. His word my hope secures. He will my shield and portion be as long as life endures. When we've been there you know, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. Yet even in our lives as a believer, we can use these same two words to describe a life without purpose. It is a melancholy, but now, which this chapter begins with. Adversity is here described as much to the life of prosperity was in the foregoing chapter. You know, and the height of that did increase in the depth of this, okay? So God sets the one over against the other. And so did Job. You know, that his afflictions might appear the more grievous, and consequently his case the more pitiable, you know. He had lived in great honor, but now he had fallen into disgrace and was as much vilified, even by the meanest, as even he had been magnified by the greatest. This he insists much on as we read in verses 1 through 14. Job had had much inward comfort and delight, but now he was a terror and burden to himself, as we learn in verses 15 and 16, and became overwhelmed with sorrow, as verses 28 through 31 will point out. That's right, Roots Magoo, no buts. Okay, so so we learn next in verses 17 to 18, verses 29 to 30, that he had long enjoyed a good state of health, but now he was sick and in pain. And in verses 20 through 22 points out to us that there was a time when the secret of God was with him, but now his communication with heaven was cut off. And he had promised himself a long life, but now he saw death at the door, described in verse 23. And then Job tells us that two things gave him some relief. Number one, that his troubles would not follow him to the grave, as you know, as verse 24 indicates, and that his conscience comforted him. You know, that in his prosperity, he had sympathized with those that were in misery, which verse 25 reveals. But now they mock at me, men younger than I, whose fathers I disdained to put with the dogs of my flock. Indeed, what profit is the strength of their hands to me? Their vigor has perished. They are gone from what want and famine, fleeing late to the wilderness, desolate and waste, who pluck mallow by the bushes and brim tree roots for their food. They were driven out from among men. They shouted at them as at a thief. They had to live in the clefts of the valleys and in the caves of the earth and the rocks. Among the bushes they braved. Under the nettles they nestled. They were sons of fools, yes, sons of vile men. They were scourged from the land. And now I am their taunting song. Yes, I am their byword. They arbor me. They keep far from me. They do not hesitate to spit in my face, because he has loosed my bowstring and afflicted me. They have cast off restraint before me. At my right hand the rabble arises, and they push away my feet, and they raise against me their ways of destruction. They break up my path. They promote my calamity. They have no helper. They come as broad breakers under the ruinous storm they roll along. So here Job makes a very large and sad complaint of the great disgrace he had fallen into. And two things he insists upon, which greatly aggravated his affliction out. First of all, Job was overwhelmed by the meanness of people who attacked him. You know, as it added much to his honor, in the day of his prosperity, that princes and nobles showed him respect and paid a difference. They paid a deference to him. So it added no less to his disgrace and his, adversity that he was spurned, by the footmen and trampled upon by those that were not only every way his inferiors, but were the meanest and most contemptible, of all mankind. None can be represented as more biased than those who are represented who insulted Job upon all accounts. I mean, they were younger than he, as he indicates in verse 1. The youth, which verse 12 also mentions, should have behaved themselves respectfully towards him for his age and gravity. And those young street thugs, they were the offspring of evil men who were so bad that such a man as Job would not even wanted to hire them to take the meanest service about his house. And as that of tending, the sheep and attending the shepherds with the dogs of his flock, they were so shabby that they were not fit to be seen among his servants, so silly that they were not fit to be employed, and so false that they were not fit to be trusted in the meanest post. Wow. In this age. you know, um, Job, here he speaks of what, he might have done, not of what he did. You know, he was not of such a spirit as to set any of the children of men with the dogs of his flock. So he knew the dignity of human nature better than to do. They and their families were the unprofitable burden. Nothing, Job himself, with all his, prudence and patience, could do nothing of them. The young were not fit for labor. They were so lazy and went about their work so awkwardly, whereto might, the strength of their hands profit me. The old were not to be advised within the smallest matters, for in them was old age indeed, right? But their old age was perished. They were twice children. I mean, I look at the immigrant problems facing the world today. Shockingly, 99% of the men are not employable since they have no hireable skills. And as a result of these individuals, they drain the economy. In order to care for them. And verse 3 points out the extreme poverty of these people. I mean, they were ready to starve, for they would not dig, and to beg they were ashamed. So the countries to sought refuge, they had their own economic difficulties to deal with. So they were forced away. Hence, they were forced to flee into the deserts, both for shelter and sustenance, and were put to taking extreme measures in order to survive. They cut up mallows by the bushes and were glad to eat them, for want of food that was fit for them. The marshmallow grows especially in marshy areas near the sea, and its root was formerly processed to make marshmallow confections. They were such lying, thieving, lurking, mischievous people that the best service the magistrates could do was to rid the country of them. While, the very mob cried after them as after a thief, they were lazy and wouldn't work, and therefore they were exclaimed against as thieves. And justly, For those that do not earn their own bread by honest labor do in effect steal the bread out of other people's mouths. An idle fellow is a public nuisance, but it's better to drive such into a workhouse as here into a wilderness, which will punish them indeed, but never reform them. They were forced to dwell in caves on the earth, and they brayed that is cried like donkeys among the bushes. Wow. They had nothing at all that would cause other people to want to help them. They were a group composed of all evil that no one would not think it possible that ever the human nature should sink so low and degenerate. Wow. As it, did in these people. But such as these were abusive to Job. First of all, in revenge, because when he was in prosperity and power, like a good magistrate, he put in, execution the laws which were enforced against such criminals, which these brutal people now remembered against him. You know, in the news, when you see a politician or police officer convicted of a crime in order to spare their lives, they're placed in protective custody or jails. Sent to a regular jail, the inmates would probably kill them in revenge against those who were, in the past, the ones responsible for putting them in prison in the first place. So we see that these evil people feel that Job is now one of them, so they lay out their attacks against him. Didn't he? I would say yes. So, look at some of the extreme abusive actions taken against Job. It was said in some books that the Apostle Peter would sometimes come in contact with mockers who would. Now, here Job says that these evil people made up mocking songs about him and would sing them when he was in their presence. And part of their songs and actions would refer to him as a horrible monster, like we see, like on The Walking Dead, basically. They expressed the greatest scorn and indignation against him, and they spat in his face or were ready to do so. But, they tripped him and kicked him and hit her in wrath because they hated him or in sport. And they cast upon him the cause of their present pathetic conditions. So it's common. Under this pretense, they accused him falsely and misrepresented his former, conversation. They reflected upon him as a tyrant and as an oppressor because he had acted with justice upon them. So I'm going to go to verse 15 now. So he says, terrors are turned upon me. They pursue my honor as the wind, and my prosperity has passed like a cloud. And now my soul is poured out because my plight, the days of affliction, bones are pierced in me at night, and my gnawing pains take no rest. Wow. By great force my garment is disfigured. It binds me about as the collar of my coat. So he has cast me into mire, and I have become like dust and ashes. I cry out to you, but you do not answer me. I stand up, and you regard me. But you have become cruel to me. With the strength of your hand, you oppose me. You lift me up to the wind and cause me to ride on it. You spoil my success, for I know that you will bring me to death and to the house appointed for all living. Surely he would not stretch out his hand against a heap of ruins if they cry out when he destroys it. Have I not wept for him who was in trouble? Has not my soul grieved for the poor? But when I looked for good, evil came to me. And when I waited for light, then came darkness. My heart is in turmoil and cannot rest. Days of affliction confront me. I go about mourning, but not in the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry out for help, and I am a brother of jackals and a companion of ostriches. My skin grows black and falls from me. My bones burn with fever. My harp is turned to mourning, and my flute to the voice of those who weep. Wow. So Roots, I need to ask you, do you remember, you like the thumbnail? That's half of my body. I thought it was catchy for the broadcast. Do you remember before 2016 him saying ostriches in this verse? I'm just wondering because I don't recall him saying ostriches. I mean, I know it's just a little touchy one there, but do you recall Job speaking about ostriches? Because I really don't. I'm gonna wait for you to answer before I go back to the other page. Yeah. Oh, you do? Okay. Okay. All right then. I'll trust you. I trust you. So, okay, I'll carry on. Let's see here. So Job comments how the affliction seized him, right, and surprised him, and he thinks and remarks how all of a sudden they had come upon him without giving him, of course, without any previous warning. So he was in great sorrow by reason of it, and his mind was filled with grief, and was not able to rest from these painful thoughts. And the sense of his calamities was continually preying upon his spirit, without any intermission. So he went mourning from day to day, always sighing and always weeping. And such cloud was constantly, upon his mind that he went in effect without the sun. Just think and imagine that this poor man had nothing that he could take any comfort in. He abandoned himself to perpetual sorrow as one that resolved to go to the grave mourning. Wow. And he walked out of the sun, so some, in dark, shady places, as melancholy people used to do. If he went into the congregation to join with them to solemn, worship, instead of standing up calmly to desire their prayers, he stood up and cried aloud, through pain of body and mind, like one half distracted. And if he appeared in public to receive visits, when the first came upon him, he would not contain himself, nor preserve mental and physical control, but stood up and shrieked aloud. Thus he was a brother to dragons and owls, both in choosing solitude and retirement, as they do, and in making a fearful, hideous noise as they do. The terror and trouble that seized his soul were the sorest part of his calamity. And if he looked toward the future, he saw everything frightful before him. And if he endeavored to shake off his terrors, they turned furiously upon him. And if he attempted to escape from them, they pursued his soul as swiftly and violently as the wind. And if he looked back, he saw all good he had formerly enjoyed removed from him, and nothing left him but the bitter remembrance of it. And if he looked within, he found his spirit quite sunk and unable to bear his infirmity. I mean, have you ever broke your leg, or had any type of blunt trauma? I mean, you then can relate how Job felt. He was full of pain, piercing pain, pain that went to the bone, to all his bones. And the pain was intense, that he couldn't sleep, and the blood and pus settled, and the sore scabbed over, which made his skin look black. Even his garment had its color changed with the continual running of his boils, and the soft clothing he used to wear had now grown so stiff that all his garments were like a starched collar. You know, thus was he cast into the mire. His body looked more like a heap of dirt than anything else. And with all the mental torture that one thing, that cut him to the heart more than anything else was that God did not appear for him. And the worst possible condition is happening to Job. He feels that our holy God has forsaken him. And his prayers not only go unanswered, but it's worse because Job feels like God has made a decision to totally ignore him. And sometimes Job is stopped in his prayers because it seems that the more he beseeches our Holy Father for help, just the opposite comes about. So, he thought God fought against him and stirred up his whole strength to ruin him. Man's substance, golly, take him in his best estate. It's nothing before the power of God, and it's soon dissolved. So, unable was Job to help himself when he was made to ride, not in triumph, but in terror, upon the wings of the wind and the judgments of God that even dissolve his substance. As a cloud is dissolved and dispersed by the wind. So, he expected that God would shortly end his life. And the grave is a house, a narrow, dark, cold, ill-furnished house, but it will be our residence, our own home. So, in the midst of all his mental and physical torture, Job foresees with comfort that death will be the period of all his calamities. Wow. Dealing with people who basically have wanted to take their lives, there's a scary, dramatic change in a person's demeanor. You know, Basically, the person has reached a stage that ending their life brings about a unique, peaceful disposition. Someone once informed me this. It takes everything that's weighing on me feel small. It relaxes me because thinking of everything I thought was life or death is nothing close. It's oddly calming. So, we see basically, we see in verse 24, though God now was a strong hand, Job thought he set himself against him. Yet he says he will not stretch out his hand to the grave. The hand of God's wrath would bring him to death, but would not follow him beyond death. His soul would be safe and happy in the world of spirits, and his body safe and easy in the dust. Though men cry in his destruction, when they're dying, there's a great deal of agony and outcry, many a sigh and groan and complaint. Yet in the grave they feel nothing, they fear nothing, but all is quiet there. Though in hell, which is called destruction, they cry, yet not in the grave. And being delivered from the second death, the first to me will be an effectual relief. Therefore he wished he might be hidden in the grave. Well, so he goes on to reflect with comfort, upon the concern he always had for the calamities of others. When he was himself at ease, did not I weep for him that was in trouble? Job's conscience witnessed for him that he had always sympathized with persons in misery and done what he would to help them. And therefore, he had reason to expect that at length both God and his friends would pity him. In the book of 2 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 29, the great student of the Bible, Paul, he referenced Job's care for the poor. Who is weak and I am not weak? Who is made to stumble and I do not burn with indignation? A major problem people deal with in their expectations, men and women have been rebellious sinners. And though they care not about what God wants, they expect him to be kind and gracious to them. Have you ever seen a tragedy and someone comments, if God was a God of love, why did he allow this to happen? I have been there, and we see it in verse 26. Job, similar, disappointment to his expectation. When I looked for good, for more good, or at least for the continuance of what I had, then evil came. At times we look for a ray of light in our difficulties, but yet it seems to get worse, doesn't it? How can anyone expect any rest when such affliction hits him or her? You know, and because of his physical condition, Job is a horrible mess. I mean, to avoid mockery and attacks by others, like those animals that dwell in the desert places, alone Job must allow. So when he needs to go somewhere, he's got to do it in the dark for fear of being attacked. So we need to take note of what Job experienced. In his prosperity, Job had taken the musical instruments and rejoiced at their sound. Now, these bring him not one bit of enjoyment. And let's also remember to enjoy these things while we have the opportunity, for no one knows when they also have their laughter turned into mourning. Yeah. I'll tell you what, that's a bitter pill to swallow right there. Give me just a second. I'm gonna let my puppy dogs in. Okay, what I was reading today in Job. Let me get back over here. I'll tell you. It was Job 30:1 through 31. Job 30:1 through 31. And I'm fixing to go on to Job 31:1 through 15. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna let my dogs in. All right, I'm back. Okay, so I'm gonna go on to Job 31:1 through 15. So number 1 says, I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? For what is the allotment of God from above, and the inheritance of the Almighty from on high? Is it not destruction for the wicked and disaster for the workers of iniquity? Does he not see my ways and count all my steps? If I have walked with falsehood, or if my foot has hastened to deceit, let me be weighed in honest scales, that God may know my integrity. If my step is turned from the way, or my heart walked after my eyes, or if any spot adheres to my hands, then let me sow and another eat. Yes, let my harvest be rooted out. Verse 9. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbor's door, then let my wife grind for another, and let others bow down over her. 11. For that would be wickedness, yes, it would be iniquity deserving of judgment. For that would be a fire that consumes the destruction and would root out all my increase. If I have despised the cause of my male or female servant when they complained against me. 14. When then shall I do when God rises up? What then shall I do when God rises up? When he punishes, what shall I answer him? Or how shall I answer him? Did not he who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one fashion us in the womb? I mean, have you heard these words before? Examine yourself or take your own inventory. Or how about getting to know you? I mean, I think this important knowledge plays out in three ways. For one thing, let us all consider that God knows us. Then, from observation, others know us. And don't forget that hopefully we're able to understand ourselves. So, here's some awesome points of Scripture where our precious Holy Spirit brings this important factor into consideration. We have Psalm 44, verse 21. Would not God search this out, for he knows the secrets of the heart? And then we have Psalm 77, verse 6. I call to remembrance my song in the night. I meditate within my heart, and my spirit makes diligent search. And then Psalm 139, verse 23. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties. And then we have Ecclesiastes 7:25. I applied my heart to know, to search and seek out wisdom and the reason of things, to know the wickedness of folly, even of foolishness and madness. And then we have Jeremiah 17:10. I, the Lord, search the heart. I test the mind, even to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his doings. And we have Lamentations 3, verse 40. This is the last one. Let us search out and examine our ways and turn back to the Lord. So one of the classic old musical movies was The King and I. I used to love that movie. You know, the song Getting to Know You was written by Rodgers and Hammerstein way back in 1951. Here are the words, okay? Getting to know you, getting to know all about you, getting to like you, getting to hope you like me, getting to know you, putting it my way, but nicely. You are precisely my cup of tea. Getting to know you, getting to feel free and easy when I'm with you. Getting to know what to say. Haven't you noticed suddenly I'm bright and breezy because of all the beautiful and new things I'm learning about you day by day? Sharing your spirit, sharing your tears and your laughter, hoping it goes on, hoping it lasts endlessly. Getting to know you, putting it my way, but sweetly. You're completely my friend, you see. Telling you my dreams, getting to feel that you are with me, making our own fun, knowing we know how to play. Not that I've met you suddenly. I'm mostly happy. I found a new pal, beautiful and true. Yes, I'm talking about you, friends today. So I hope you noticed in our reading of this chapter that our friend Job is talking, he's taking his own inventory for reviewing his life. We see in verses 1 through 4, Job acquitting himself from having an unclean heart. And in his continual self-examination, Job looked at his business interactions with others and felt that he never committed any fraud or injustice. And our holy God had given Adam a wife, one woman, not many. Job knew that he had remained faithful to his wife and reveals in verses 9 through 15 that he never committed adultery. In one, he says, I have made a covenant with my eyes. Why then should I look upon a young woman? For what is the allotment of God from above, and the inheritance of the Almighty from on high? It's not destruction for the wicked, and disaster for the workers of iniquity. Verse 4, does he not see my ways and count all my steps? If I have walked with falsehood, or if my foot has hastened to deceit, let me be weighed on honest scales, that God may know my integrity. Verse 7, If my step is turned from the way, or my heart walked after my eyes, or if any spot adheres to my hands, then let me sow and another eat. Yes, let my harvest be rooted out. Verse 9. If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbor's door, then let my wife grind for another, and let others bow down over her. For that would be wickedness. Yes, it would be iniquity, deserving of judgment. For that would be a fire that consumes the destruction and would root out all my increase. If I have despised the cause of my male or female servant, when they complain against me, what then shall I do when God rises up? When he punishes, how shall I answer him? Verse 15. Did not he who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one fashion us in the womb? So in the book of 1 John 16, we learn about the three areas of weakness which cause many to fail, right? Or fall. For all that's in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. In relationship, to these, Job claims that he did not fall victim of these fallen desires. And against the lust of the flesh, he not only kept himself clear, but from adultery, but from defiling his neighbor's wives, and from all lewdness with any woman whatsoever. He kept no concubine, no mistress, but was, he was inevitably completely faithful to the marriage bed, though his wife was none of the wisest, best, or kindest. From the beginning, it was so that a man should have not, should have but one wife and cleave to her only. And Job kept closely to that instruction. And, he hated the idea of even any type of transgression. For though his greatness might tempt him to it, his goodness kept him from it. And to accomplish his control over his flesh, Job developed a few resolutions. First of all, he made a covenant to control what he looked at. And he made sure that when he came upon a beautiful woman, he would not allow himself to take in her beauty. Job knew from history, not far in his past, that the first sin began in the eye. In the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 6, we find out. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, so we must not mess with what we might lust after. And therefore, what we must not lust after, we must not look at. A second safeguard was that Job, he controlled his thoughts and would not allow his thoughts to control him. He would not so much as allow a wandering thought. And so what governed Job's commitment was his fear of hurting God. Job knew, so should we understand, that uncleanliness is a sin, that forfeits all good coming from our Holy Father and shuts us out from the hope of it. What blessing can impure sinners expect from the pure and holy God? Or what measure of his favor? What inheritance of the Almighty can anyone look for from on high? There is no portion, no inheritance, no true happiness for a soul, but what is in God, in the Almighty, and what comes from above, from on high. Anyone that lives in uncleanliness render themselves utterly unfit for commission with God, either in grace here or in glory hereafter. So please take note that verse 3 points out that this type of sin incurs divine vengeance. It will certainly be the sinner's ruin if it be not repented of in time. Like we read from the beginning of Genesis, this is the sinfulness of the sin that it alienates the mind from God. Here's an important fact for all to understand and take to heart. Sins cannot be hidden from the all-seeing God. An impure thought cannot be so close, nor a shameless look so quick as to escape his awareness, much less any act of uncleanliness so secretly done as to be out of his sight. If Job was at any time tempted to this sin, he restrained himself from it and all approaches to it. With this, pertinent thought in his mind. So he stood up on his guard against, the love of the world and carefully avoided all sinful and direct means of getting wealth. He dreaded all forbidden profit as much as all forbidden pleasure. In general, he had been honest and just in all his dealings, and never, to his knowledge, did anybody any wrong. He never dealt with any kind of falsehood, and that is, he never would tell a lie to get a good bargain. It was never his way to banter, you know, or make any words in his dealings. Some men, their constant walk is a constant cheat, and they either make what they have, more than it is, that they, may be trusted, or less than it is, that nothing may be expected from them. So we take certain things for granted in our country. I mean, do you ever wonder if you really got 10 gallons the last time you filled your car with gasoline? If that premium gasoline really was 87% octane, if you really got a half a pound of roast beef last week from the deli, if that package of cornflakes really had 20 ounces in it, I mean, most people take it for granted that the measurements, that affect them every day, of the year are accurate. Luckily for us, U.S. residents, there is a dedicated group of state and municipal weights and measures that officials working, to ensure measurement accuracy and promote a fair and equitable marketplace. That's what they say. Equity, it protects both buyer and seller. And the buyer is assured that they get what they pay for. And the seller is assured of a marketplace based on fair competition. So the Department of Weights and Measures program is a corporate effort, of state and local offices enforcing a single state law. So the Weights and Measures programs, they're a critical part of each state's infrastructure, protecting every consumer and every business, which I don't believe in that crap anymore, but I'm just saying, what they say. So there you have it. But, Job's steps, they never turned out of the way. The way of justice and fair dealing, from that he never deviated. His heart, it didn't walk after his eyes. That is, he didn't covet what he saw that was another's, nor wish it his own. Covetousness, is called the lust of the eye. I mean, Job, he's so confident of his own honesty that as we read in verse 6, he's willing to have his goods searched. And he's willing to forfeit the whole cargo if there were found any prohibited or contraband goods. Anything but what he came honestly by. So Job describes two more instances of his integrity. He respected other men and their marriages. He did not wrong his own marriage bed, and he did not so much as covet his neighbor's wife. For even his heart was not deceived by a woman. The beauty of another man's wife did not kindle in him any unchaste desires. Secondly, he never acted or imagined any unchaste design to have another woman besides his wife. He was so adamant about this fact that he was willing to have the same thing done to him and face the shame and heartache done by another man with his wife. And we see this very thing happening against David due to his sin with his best friend's wife, Bathsheba. When we read this in the book of 2 Samuel chapter 16, verse 15, meanwhile, Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem. And Ahithophel, a person. And this person was with him. And so it was when Hushai, the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom, long live the king, long live the king. So Absalom said to Hushai, is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend? And Hushai said to Absalom, no, but whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his I will be. and with him I will remain. Furthermore, this verse 19, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have served in your father's presence, so will I be in your presence. Verse 20, then Absalom said to Ahithophel, give advice as to what we should do. And Ahithophel said to Absalom, go in your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you are abhorred by your father. Then the hands of all who are with you will be strong. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the top of the house, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all of Israel. Now the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was if one had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the advice of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. Okay, were you referring to the ostrich when you were asking about what chapters? Excuse me. Okay, if that's the case, I'll take it real quick. All right, so you're referring to the ostrich? Okay, I got you. Let me take it real quick. I've got paper notes. Today I've actually got paper notes and computer notes. I'm going to go ahead and finish through this, and then I'll go backwards to find it, so that way I don't lose my place. And I'll tell you exactly what that was. So I don't want to lose my place. All right, we're going to march on, and then we'll go back to the ostrich. Okay, so Job, he understands, as he indicates in verse 12, that this type of sin might justly become the ruin of his estate, and that those that indulge in it are said to burn, and it consumes all that is good. There, the convictions and the comforts, and the lays, and it lays, the conscience waste, and it kindles the fire of God's wrath, which, if not extinguished by the blood of Christ, will burn to the lowest hell, and it will consume even to that eternal destruction. It consumes the body, and it consumes the substance. It roots out all the increase. A good way to remember this is by the simple phrase, burning lust bring burning judgment. So Job, he was the kind of boss that everyone wished he or she had ever had. And he had a very great tenderness and concern for his servants and ruled them with a gentle hand. And he had a great household, and he managed it well. And by this, he evidenced his sincerity, that he had grace to govern his passion as well as his appetite. So it's revealed in verse 13 that Job did not despise the cause of his manservant, nor of his maidservant. Then they contended with him. And if they, contradicted him in anything, he was willing to hear their reasons. And if they had offended him or were accused of him, he would patiently hear what they had to say for themselves, in their own vindication or excuse. And if they complained of any hardship, he put upon them, and he didn't browbeat them and bid them to hold their tongues, but gave them leave to tell their story. And he basically redressed he readdressed their grievances as far as it appeared they had right on their side. He was tender of them, not only when they served and pleased him, but even when they contended with him. Herein he was a great example to masters to give their servants that which is just and equal, to do the same things to them that they expect from them. So in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 6, verse 44, it's Luke chapter 6, verse 44. We can read, for every tree is known by its own fruit, right? For men do not gather figs from thorns, nor do they gather grapes from bramble bush. Now Job knew that what moved him to treat his servants kindly was that he had an eye to Almighty God, both as his judge and his servant's maker. As his judge, Job considered, if I should be imperious and severe with my servants, what then shall I do when God rises up to defend them? He considered that he had a master in heaven to whom he was accountable, who will rise up and will visit his judgment for wrongs done to his children. Consider what will become of us if we are cruel and unmerciful to our brethren. Will be heard, and the sins of those injured will be punished. Those that showed no mercy will find none. And what shall we do then? Job gave great examination to this fact. If he was ever tempted to be harsh with his servants, to deny them their right and turn a deaf ear to their reasonings, this, thought came into his mind. Did not he that made me in the womb make him? I am a creature as well as he, and my being is derived and depending as well as his. He partakes of the same nature that I do, and is the work of the same hand. Have we not all one Father? Now, in ending, the portion of this study, let us take to heart that whatever difference there is among men in their outward condition, in their capacity of mind or strength of body, or place in the world. He that made the one made the other also, which is a good reason why we should not mock at men's natural infirmities, nor trample upon those that are in any way that we think are our inferiors, but in everything do as we have done unto us. Okay, so let me go back up here and I'll get to the ostrich. My paper notes are hand scratched. So let me go over here to my computer notes, which are huge. Okay. Let's see here. So here it is. Okay. So reading. Hmm. Greatest. Speed reading here real quick. Yeah, what we were reading was Job 30 verses 1 through 31. So I'm just trying to find where it said ostrich real quick. Dogs. Labor. Smells. Flowers. Donkeys. Lots of people. People. Okay. Actions. Monster. Criminals. Social disparity. Problems. Definitely women, ten, or darkness, terminal warning, jackals. Okay, I am a brother of jackals and a companion of ostriches. So that's going to be verse 29. So it's going to be Job 30:29. Yeah, there it is. 20:39. You know, while we're sitting here, I'm gonna pull up the Septuagint and see what it says because I trust it. Okay, so let me come over here and share it. I'm going to share my screen. Hey there, Tupac. Okay, let's see here. Share, share screen. Um, here it is right here. Share. Okay. So let me get this. Let me get it on full screen. Okay. So there's a little difference there in there now. Okay. Okay. So over here we've got I am a brother of dragon, and I am a brother to dragons and a companion to owls. And the translation over here says I am become a brother of monsters and a companion of ostriches. See, I knew. See, it's because I read the Aramaic and the Septuagint a lot because it's a more pure translation. I knew that there it said something other than ostriches. That's what I was referring to right there. Roots. You see there? There's the two differences. I have become a brother of monsters and a companion of ostriches. And the original said, I am a brother to dragons and a companion to owls. So they've changed owls to ostriches. See there? That was my reference point. See, when you go to the Aramaic, that's the first translated version. You go to the Septuagint, the lexicon, that's the second translated version. I believe one of them is Greek and one's Latin, if I'm not mistaken, okay? I could be wrong on that. But yeah, there you go. So I'm hoping that you can see that on the screen. Okay, let me go up a little higher so that way it's more visible, more legible. See right there? I don't know if you can see my pointer. Let's see right here. Right here. Whoops. Whoopsie. Right. There it goes. Right there. You see that? Is it highlighted for you? Let me come back over here. Yeah, where that's highlighted. Owls and ostriches right above that. Yeah. See, I don't know why. I recall reading it something other than ostriches. And there you have it. I am become a brother to monsters and a companion of ostriches. That's the new translation. The Septuagint lexicon is this right here. Right there. Yeah. That's the old translation right there. Yep. So it does say owls. So where did the ostriches one come in? That's weird. That's really weird. These translations vary. That's what gets a lot of people caught up with the Mandela effect, saying that that things have changed because of the Mandela effect. Scriptures changed, and it's not the Mandela effect. It's just a differential of translation. You see, a lot. I mean, I do believe in the Mandela effect. I do, but a lot of this stuff is just bogus. It's just they're looking at two separate translations, and that gets confusing for people. Yep. Yep. Burnout says ostriches. Okay. Wow. All right. Okay. Well, since it's 5 o'clock, I'm going to shut up and get out of here, and we'll pick back up tomorrow with Joe. We're going to try to get. Before I get out of here, have you noticed that the book of Job is worded so much differently than the rest of the Bible? I mean, just the way Job speaks, it sounds so much more like modern man speaking. I don't know. It's really emotional, and it just feels like it's somebody from our era who's speaking. You know, I mean, I don't know. That's how it sits, resonates in my spirit anyway. It feels like it's a man from our era, from our age, who's actually speaking. It doesn't feel so antiquated and way off. Like the other scriptures do. A lot of the other scriptures. I mean, when you read them, or like for me, when I read them, when I read the other scriptures, I feel like I'm reading a person's words that are from a complete other time, right? But when I read Job, that resonates with me, and it feels like I'm reading the words of a modern day man who all these things could have happened to him today in my age. I mean, I read a lot of things, and I feel like the storyline is coinciding with what's happening with us right now, right? So don't misunderstand me on that point. The storyline itself will, feel like it's coinciding with how we're living our lives today and the things that are taking place as far as you know, Bible prophecy, right? Yeah, I don't know, but it really does. It feels like Job is plucked straight out of our age, our era. To hear his speech and his, the terminology of his speech, the way he speaks. It just doesn't feel like an ancient man. It feels like a modern man. You know what I mean? That makes any sense. Which I've heard a lot of people say that they feel Job doesn't even belong in the Bible. That's from a totally different time. Which I'm not arguing that. I'm not going to question or argue. It's in the Bible. It's there for a reason. But I mean, Job just feels so different than the rest of the scriptures, doesn't it? Yeah, the timelines are different. You're right. You're absolutely right. Sorry to be crunching. I'm starving. I gotta go make something to eat. So, all right. Well, hopefully I'll see you tomorrow. God willing. We're still around and kicking. Thanks for studying with me. It's always fun to have you here. And I'll pick back up on this tomorrow. Thanks, you Boots Magoo, for being here.